Hi class, Pedro Esquivel here. I'm going to be performing Prose, specifically Stephen King's It. Now, my cut takes place when a 6-year-old boy is running down the street, chasing after his paper boat, and it's raining, and the paper boat streams into a storm drain on the side of the street. So that's going to be where I start off. He got up and walked over to the storm drain. He dropped to his knees and peered in. There were yellow eyes in there, the sort of eyes he had always imagined but never actually seen down in his basement. A perfectly reasonable and rather pleasant voice spoke to him from inside the storm drain. "Hi, Georgie," it said. George blinked and looked again. He could barely credit what he saw. It was like something from a made-up story. There was a clown in the storm drain. The clown held a bunch of balloons, all colors, like gorgeous ripe fruit in one hand, and the other he held George's newspaper boat. "Want your boat, Georgie?" He smiled. George smiled back. He couldn't help it. It was the kind of smile you just had to answer. "I sure do," he said. The clown laughed. "I sure do. That's good. That's very good. And how about a balloon?" "Well, sure." He reached forward and then drew his hand back reluctantly. "I'm not supposed to take stuff from strangers. My dad said so." "Very wise of your dad, George. Very wise indeed." "I, George, am Mr. Bob Gray, also known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Pennywise, meet George. George, meet Pennywise. And now we know each other. I'm not a stranger to you, and you're not a stranger to me, correct?" George giggled. "I guess so." He reached forward again and drew his hand back again. "How did you get down there?" "Storm just blew me away. Blew the whole circus away." "Can you smell the circus, Georgie?" George leaned forward. Suddenly he could smell peanuts, hot roasted peanuts, and vinegar, the white kind you put on your French fries. He could smell cotton candy and frying doughboys. And yet, under it all was the smell of flood and decomposing leaves and dark storm-drained shadows. That smell was wet and rotten. But the other smells were stronger. "You bet I can smell it," he said. "Want your boat, Georgie?" Pennywise asked. "I only repeat myself because you really do not seem that eager." He held it up, smiling. He was wearing a baggy silk suit with great big orange buttons, a bright tie, electric blue, flopped down his front, and his hands were big white gloves like the kind Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck always wore. "Yeah, sure," George said, looking into the storm drain. "And a balloon? I've got red, green, yellow, blue. Do they float?" The clown's grin widened. "Float? Oh yes, indeed they do. They float." And George reached. The clown seized his arm, and George saw the clown's face change. What he saw destroyed his sanity in one clawing stroke. "They float," the thing in the drain crooned in a clotted, chuckling voice. "They float, Georgie, and when you're down here with me, you'll float too. Everything down here floats," that chuckling, rotten voice whispered, and suddenly there was a ripping noise and a flaring sheet of agony, and George Denbrough knew no more. Thank you.